The Wild West you saw in the movies never existed. The women in saloons weren't those seductive, bold figures. Most of them ended up there before they turned 20, trapped in debts they could never pay off. Few survived more than 5 years living that life. What happened to them is something no one in Hollywood had the guts to show. Today we're going to look at 23 of these stories of real women. Number 1. In Virginia City, Nevada, during the silver mining boom, prostitutes lived and died without anyone ever recording their names. Most of them vanished without a trace, but a woman named Mary did something different. Before she died, she carved a message into the wooden wall of the room where she worked. The words were simple and straight to the point. I was someone's daughter. Think about that for a second. She didn't ask for help. She didn't write a letter. She understood nobody would claim her body, that no newspaper would print her obituary. So she did the only thing she could. She turned that wall into a document. It was her way of saying that before that room, before that life, she had a family, an origin. That sentence lasted longer than any gravestone ever could. Number 2. In 1880, a government census taker knocked on the door of a brothel in the Wild West and wrote down the name of a 12-year-old girl, Minnie Smith. He recorded it, closed his notebook, and moved on to the next house. Nobody investigated. Nobody came back to get her out of there. The official document still exists today in the Federal Census Archives. Think about that for a second. The government itself knew a child was living in a brothel and did absolutely nothing. It wasn't some isolated case that slipped by. It was a public employee doing his job, logging that situation like it was routine. In mining regions, the exploitation of miners was part of the economic machine, just like pickaxes and saloons. Profit came first, human dignity came last. Minnie had no voice back then. But the record that should have protected her became proof of an entire system's neglect. Number 3. In the Boot Hill Cemetery in Tombstone, they dug up a locket alongside the remains of a nameless woman. Inside it was a picture of another woman, maybe a mother, a sister, someone she left behind. In the records from the time, she shows up only as a soiled dove, the term they used for prostitutes. No last name, no story, no proper funeral. But that locket tells what the official documents ignored. She had people. Somewhere, someone probably kept a seat at the table for a daughter the desert swallowed up. Thousands of women disappeared like that in the American West. They came into towns out of need, by mistake, or because they had nowhere else to go. When they died, nobody claimed the body. They were buried in shallow graves with nothing but what they had in their pocket. That locket survived time and indifference. It's the only thing that proves that woman existed as something more than a police record. Number 4. Ah Toy, the law as a weapon of war. In California in 1849, most Chinese people had no voice at all in American courts. The system just wasn't built for them. But Ah Toy didn't accept that. She arrived in San Francisco during the gold rush and built her own business in a territory dominated by men. When customers tried to pay with fake gold, she did something nobody expected. She took the case to the American legal system. A Chinese woman, an immigrant, suing white men in a California courtroom in the middle of the 19th century. The judge accepted the case. The courtroom got so packed, they had to control who came in. Ah Toy didn't ask for favors. She learned the rules of the game and used those same rules against people who thought she had no rights at all. In a country where the law was made to protect some and ignore others, she found a gap and slipped through it. Number 5. Irish Mag, the blood precedent. In '86, Deadwood was a mining camp with no official law. When Irish Mag stabbed a man who attacked her, nobody expected her to walk free. Prostitutes back then were treated by the system like second-class citizens. people the courts basically ignored. But something happened that no one saw coming. A jury made up only of men, miners, and merchants deliberated for just 10 minutes and found her not guilty. 10 minutes. Think about that. In a time when women could barely even testify in court, that group of men recognized she had every right to defend her own life. Without realizing it, that makeshift jury set a precedent that challenged the mindset of the day. The decision said something no Wild West court had said so clearly. No matter your job, nobody is anyone's property. Number 6. Squirrel Tooth. Alice got that nickname because of a front tooth that really stood out. Her real name was Mary Elizabeth Haley, and she started out in 1850s Texas with nothing to her name. What few people talk about is how she got out of total poverty and ended up running her own business at a time when a woman couldn't even open a bank account. She understood something a lot of the men around her didn't. Whoever controls the money controls the rules. In the roughest parts of the West, where most women were used and tossed aside, Alice saved every penny and invested in property. She didn't ask permission or wait for someone to open the door for her. In a world built by men and for men, she just bought the key. Her story raises a question that still hits a nerve today. Was the system so brutal that the only way out was to become its owner? Number 7. Alice Ivers was born in England in 851 and got a formal education, something rare for any woman back then. When she arrived in the Wild West, she found out she had a talent few men could match. She was brilliant at the math behind poker. With a cigar between her fingers and a face that gave nothing away, she sat at the toughest tables in the West and cleaned the guys out one by one. The detail that caught everyone off guard was that she never needed to cheat. According to her, there was no need because the men already played badly enough while being honest. With the money she built up at the tables, she opened her own place, Alice's Palace, which worked as a casino and brothel. But she had one non-negotiable rule. Every Sunday, the place shut its doors so she could read the Bible in peace. She lived to 79 and never apologized to anyone for the path she chose to take. Number 8. In 1907, Ellen Little did something few women in that situation had the courage to do. She spoke up. After surviving a suicide attempt in a Chicago brothel, she didn't stay quiet. She went straight to reporters and laid out, in detail, how the debt system worked from the inside. The madams charged the women for the room, food, clothes, and even fines when they tried to refuse customers. The math never worked out. The more they worked, the more they owed. It was a numbers trap designed so nobody could get out. Ellen's account hit the newspapers and caused an uproar the brothel owners didn't expect. Because it's one thing for a city to know the district exists. It's another thing to read, in plain detail, how it works. The public outrage that followed did more for reform than years of moral preaching in churches. Number 9. Molly Johnson lived in 1880s Wyoming, in a place they called a hog ranch, basically a roadside bar that sold cheap booze and offered female company for soldiers and cowboys. But her operation went way beyond that. Molly ran the place with an iron fist and became known for a level of violence that would make any gunslinger think twice. Reports from the time say she beat up customers, threatened her workers, and was involved in at least one murder. What stands out is that in that isolated area, far from any real law, a woman managed to build a small empire based on fear. The military authorities at Fort Laramie knew what was going on there, but for years nobody did anything. Molly operated in a gray zone where civilization still hadn't really arrived, and that gave her total freedom to do whatever she wanted. Number 10. Molly May, the woman who fooled an entire town. Deadwood, South Dakota, was one of the most brutal places in the Wild West. A mining town where the law barely existed and racial prejudice could cost someone their life. And that's exactly where a black woman decided to live by passing as white. Molly May ran her own business for years, dealing face-to-face with people who would have never accepted her if they'd known the truth. Every morning was a calculated risk. Every conversation was a test. She didn't use some elaborate disguise, just her lighter skin tone and the confidence of someone who couldn't afford to hesitate. The most impressive part is that no one around her suspected a thing. In a time when being identified as black could mean losing everything, including your life, Molly built an entire life on a secret. It wasn't just survival. It was a daily bet against a system that wanted to erase her. Number 11. Fanny Porter ran one of the most strategically placed establishments in San Antonio in the late 1890s. It wasn't just a brothel. It was a meetup spot where members of the Wild Bunch, including Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, hid out between robberies. The police knew it, but they never managed to get enough proof. Fanny had one simple rule: nobody talked about who came in or went out. That code of silence made her essential to some of the most wanted outlaws in the country. She moved money around, helped set up escapes, and kept connections with criminal networks that stretched across entire states. When pressure from the authorities finally ramped up, Fanny simply vanished. Nobody knows where she went, when she died, or what name she lived under afterward. In a world where almost every criminal back then ended up locked up or dead, she walked away without a trace. And that might be the biggest feat of all. Number 12. Julia Bullitt lived in Virginia City, Nevada, during the Silver Rush in the 1860s. That town was basically lawless, where miners risked their lives every day and had zero protection. Julia understood that before any politician did. She organized fundraisers for the volunteer firefighters, cared for the sick during epidemics, and paid out of her own pocket to help families who lost everything. The firefighters named her an honorary member of the company, something no other woman managed back then. In January '08, she was found strangled in her own bed. The whole town stopped. Firefighters carried her coffin down the main streets, and stores closed their doors out of respect. A French immigrant named John Moline was hanged for the crime, but a lot of people at the time doubted he acted alone. What did Julia know about the mine owners that made her so protected and at the same time so vulnerable? Number 13. Pearl Hart had everything going against her. To be just another woman forgotten by the system. She worked in saloons, went through things nobody would choose, and lived with practically no money. But in 1899, she did something nobody expected. She robbed a stagecoach in Arizona. It was one of the last stagecoach robberies ever recorded in the Wild West. And the reason? She needed money to take care of her sick mother. When the police got their hands on her, Pearl didn't hang her head. She did the opposite. She used the newspapers to her advantage, gave interviews from jail, and built an image as an outlaw with a cause. The reporters loved it. The public did too. She understood before anyone else, something that seems obvious today. If society has already pushed you to the margins, you might as well control the story yourself. After she got out of prison, she simply disappeared. Nobody knows for sure what happened to her. Number 14. Big Nose. Kate lived long enough to see the Wild West turn into a movie legend. Born in Hungary in 1850, Mary Catherine Horany crossed the ocean as a child and ended up surviving things that broke men far tougher than she was. She was orphaned early, ran away from a foster home, and by 16 she was on her own in the most dangerous saloons in American territory. It was in that world that she met Doc Holliday, the tubercular dentist who became a gunslinger. It's said that one night in Fort Griffin, Texas, she set a building on fire to stir up chaos and pull Holliday out of trouble that probably would have ended with him hanging from a rope. For decades, journalists and writers tried to get her to spill the details of the shootout at the OK Corral and her life with Holiday. She refused almost all of it. She died in 1940 at 89 in Arizona. She took to the grave what nobody could buy, threaten, or talk her into handing over her version of the facts. Number 15. Dora Hand, The Collateral Damage of Power, Dodge City, 88. Dora Hand was a saloon singer and also sang at church on Sundays, a woman respected on both sides of the street. One October night before dawn, a gunman named Spike Kennedy fired at Mayor Dog Kelly's house, looking to settle a personal score. The bullet went through the wall and killed Dora while she slept in the mayor's bed. The mayor wasn't even there that night. She had nothing to do with that fight. Bat Masterson and Wyatt Earp went after him and captured Kennedy, but the guy was acquitted at trial. Dora's death showed something that kept happening on the frontier. Feuds between powerful men made the people nearby pay the price. And almost always, it was a woman. Number 16. Kitty Leroy was only 28 when she was shot dead by her own husband in Deadwood, South Dakota, in 87. The story that made it down to us usually paints it as a love and jealousy drama, almost like a movie script. But when you look at the facts calmly, the picture changes a lot. Kitty owned a saloon, played cards better than most men in town, and carried several pistols. In a territory where women could barely own property, she built her own business. Her fifth husband couldn't handle living with a woman who didn't need him for anything. So he did what insecure men do when they lose control. He used violence. After killing her, he turned the gun on himself. For decades, people told this story like a tragic romance, but today, we recognize the pattern. It wasn't passion, it was possession. Kitty paid with her life for something that shouldn't cost anyone anything: independence. Number 17. Belle Siddons wasn't your average Wild West woman. Born into a Southern family with a formal education, she spoke French, played piano, and knew literature. After the Civil War, where she worked as a Confederate spy, her life took a turn nobody expected. She ended up in the saloons and brothels of towns like Deadwood. But here's the detail that changes everything. She wrote. She put down in letters what was happening around her, with brutal clarity. In one of those letters, she described the women in that world as walking dead. Think about that. A woman with an elite background who'd already risked her life for the Confederacy, now stuck in a world she herself knew had no way out. Those writings are rare. Almost no woman in that situation left her own record. Belle did. And what she described was anything but glamorous. Number 18. Eleanor Dumont, known as Madame Moustache. She came over from France and took over the gambling tables of the Wild West at a time when a woman couldn't even walk into a saloon. When she was young, Eleanor Dumont was such a skilled dealer that minors lined up to play at her table. The charm helped, of course, but here's the detail nobody talks about. The West didn't forgive women for getting older. Over time, hair started growing on her upper lip. The nickname came fast and without mercy, Madame Moustache. She didn't run. She spent decades working gambling tables, getting tougher and more experienced, but her debts kept piling up, and the respect she thought she had was really just mockery in disguise. One day, she left town carrying a bottle of wine and a dose of morphine. She didn't come back. Her story shows something brutal about that world. A woman could be brilliant at what she did, but she was only taken seriously as long as her looks still pleased people. Number 19. Mattie Blaylock, the ghost of the legend. You know Wyatt Earp. Everybody does. The hero of the OK Corral, the lawman who faced the cowboys in Tombstone. But what about the woman who was by his side through all of it? Mattie Blaylock lived with Earp as his wife for years. She followed him to Arizona, and she was there during the tensest days in that town. But when Earp met Josephine Marcus, Mattie basically stopped existing in the story. He left and never looked back. Maddie was left alone with no money and no support. She ended up relying on laudanum just to get through the day-to-day. She died at 30 from an overdose, probably on purpose. And here's the detail that stings. In the decades that followed, when biographers built up the Earp legend, Maddie was erased on purpose. Josephine actively worked to remove any mention of her from the books. The story of the Wild West wasn't just written by the winners. It was edited by the people who were left. Number 20. Josephine Hensley arrived in Helena, Montana in 1867, when the town was still little more than a mining camp full of men crazy for gold. She had little money and no connections, but she understood something businessmen took decades to learn. Whoever controls a city's entertainment controls the city. Within a few years, she owned property, saloons, and establishments that high society visited in secret but condemned in public. The same politicians pushing for laws against her businesses showed up at the back door after dark. The detail few people mention is that Josephine funded construction projects, loaned money, and helped Helena become the state capital. When she died, her fortune matched that of any local tycoon. The town she helped build made sure to erase her name from the official story, but property records don't lie. She was in everything. Number 21. Calamity. Jane was born Martha Jane Canary in 856 in Missouri, the daughter of a poor family that fell apart early. By 12, she was already an orphan. Surviving on her own in mining camps in Wyoming, her real life was marked by hard labor, heavy alcoholism, and a poverty that never let go. But here's the detail few people know. Jane understood before anyone else that a good story is worth more than the truth. She started spreading exaggerated versions of herself, saying she'd been an Army scout and that she saved soldiers in combat. No military record backs that up. In 1896, she published an autobiography packed with made-up episodes that turned her into a legend. And the most calculated move of all, her last request was to be buried next to Wild Bill Hickok in Deadwood, a man who barely knew her. Even in death, she chose the script over reality. Number 22. Belle Ryan ran one of the best-known brothels in Denver in the late 1800s, but what stood out wasn't the business itself. It was how she ran it. At a time when women in that life were treated as disposable, Belle did things differently. She paid doctors to take care of her workers, made sure no customer abused them, and set rules that a lot of legit places back then couldn't even imagine having. Sounds contradictory, right? A brothel owner worried about human dignity. And that's exactly where the story gets interesting. Belle made money off a system that ruined lives, but she used that money to soften the damage the system itself caused. She wasn't a hero or a villain. She was someone operating in a gray zone most of us can't even imagine. The question that sticks is this: when every option is bad, does doing the least bad thing count as doing the right thing? Number 23. China Mary, Polybimus, Life's Lottery. Sometime in the 1870s, a Chinese girl was sold by her own family and brought to the United States. She arrived in Idaho without speaking English, knowing no one, treated like property. Her real name was Lalu Nathoy, but here she became just Polly Bemis. The story goes that a miner named Charlie Bemis won her in a poker game. Think about that for a second. A human being's fate decided by a hand of cards. She got lucky because Charlie turned out to be a decent guy, and the two of them got married. But what if he hadn't been? What if another player had won that hand? Her life would have been completely different. That was the reality for a lot of Asian immigrants back then. That so-called American dream everyone talks about didn't start with opportunity. It started with pure survival. And for Polly's fate, everything depended on who had the best cards that night.